Today, we are taking a deep dive into the absolutely wild history of oil, power, and the Gulf nations. We're going to unpack how this one single commodity has literally dictated the flow of wars, built gleaming cities out of desert sand, and time again brought the entire global economy to its knees. And as you're about to see, the crisis that's unfolding right now, well, it might just be the most dangerous one yet. Okay, let's start with right now. As of this morning, March 10th, 2026, this is the price for 1 barrel of Brent crude oil. Now that's a number that shapes everything, from what you pay at the pump to the fate of nations. But honestly, that number by itself doesn't even begin to tell the real story. This is the real story. That's a 34% jump in price in just 1 year. That is a staggering leap, and it's a number that screams fear, instability, and a global economy teetering on the edge of another massive oil shock. So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? To really get what's happening today, we have to trace the history all the way back. We're going to start with the current crisis, this geopolitical tinderbox. Then, we'll rewind to see how the Gulf nations seized control of their own resources in the first place, how they learned to use oil as a weapon, and how decades of war have rewritten the rules of the game, leading us right back to the fire we're seeing in 2026. So what is behind that insane price spike? This isn't just Wall Street jitters. No, this is the direct result of a hot war escalating in the heart of the Middle East, a conflict that has the world's energy supply locked firmly in its crosshairs. So here's the quick rundown of how the dominoes fell. The whole thing started with a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities late last year. By February, that spark had exploded into open warfare, and now Iran is hitting back by attacking the economic lifelines of its biggest rivals. We're talking about the oil fields of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and those absolutely critical shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz. You know, this brings up a really important question. How did these Gulf nations get so powerful that their local conflicts could shake the entire planet? For that answer, we have to jump in the time machine and go all the way back to 1960, to a moment of real post-colonial anger. This right here captures one of the most incredible power shifts of the 20th century. Before 1960, you had this group of powerful Western oil companies, the so-called Seven Sisters, and they controlled everything. They set the prices, they took the profits, and they gave just a tiny fraction back to the countries where the oil was. OPEC was created to completely flip that script. They demanded fair prices, control over production, and most importantly, total sovereignty over their own natural resources. And this was the revolutionary idea that lit the fuse: resource nationalism. It's a simple concept, but it's incredibly profound. The belief that the black gold under their desert sand belonged to their people, not some company halfway across the world. This wasn't just about creating a cartel, it was about fundamentally redrawing the global balance of power.
And that brings us to the moment the world truly felt the raw power of the Gulf's new position. This wasn't just about negotiating prices anymore. Oh no, this was about turning off the tap. This was the world's first great oil shock.
The trigger? The 1973 Yom Kippur War. The moment the US moved to support Israel, Arab oil producers, led by Saudi Arabia, unleashed their new economic weapon. Step 1, they quadrupled the price of oil, like overnight. Step 2, they slapped a full embargo on the United States and its allies. And just like that, in a matter of months, the global economy was thrown into absolute chaos. And just look at this chart, it really shows you the sheer violence of that price shock. This was not some gradual climb. The price went from about $3 a barrel to nearly 12. For an industrialized world that had been built entirely on the assumption of cheap, endless oil, this was a seismic event. Nothing would be the same.
The fallout in the West was immediate and painful. I mean, people remember these images of cars lined up for miles just to get gas. The economy got hit with stagflation, that horrible combination of a dead economy and soaring prices. But it also forced a real reckoning. Things like the fuel efficiency standards in the car you drive today, they were born directly out of this crisis, as was the International Energy Agency, which was created to make sure this could never happen again. Of course, this new power was bound to be tested. The next couple of decades were just defined by brutal regional wars that really shattered OPEC's unity and rewrote the rules of the energy game, often with absolutely devastating results. The second oil shock came just a few years later. First, the 1979 Iranian Revolution took all of their oil off the market. Then, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in 1980. With two of the world's biggest producers now at war, the markets panicked, sending prices flying from around $14 to almost $40 a barrel. But then came the whiplash. In a bid to regain market control and maybe punish some rivals, Saudi Arabia decided to flood the market with cheap oil. It was a bold strategy, but it completely backfired, triggering a massive price crash that just ravaged the economies of oil-producing countries for the better part of a decade.
The next big flashpoint was Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990, and as Iraqi forces were pushed back, they unleashed an environmental catastrophe. This number, 700. That's how many Kuwaiti oil wells they lit on fire. And it wasn't just the fires. They deliberately sabotaged pipelines and terminals. This is the estimated number of barrels of oil they dumped directly into the Persian Gulf. It created the single worst oil spill in all of human history.
And this was the cost just to put Kuwait back together again, a $60 billion price tag, mostly paid for by its Gulf allies. It just goes to show you the enormous burden these wars placed on the entire region, not just the countries directly involved.
Okay, this brings us into the 21st century and a totally new kind of war. After the hot wars of the 80s and 90s, we got an economic one, a financial showdown that, believe it or not, set the stage for the military crisis we're seeing today. And this chart perfectly captures Saudi Arabia's great gamble in 2014. They were facing a new threat they hadn't seen before, the American shale boom. So, what did they do? They opened the taps again. The goal was to crash the price so low that it would bankrupt all their new competitors in the US. And they did it, sending the price from $115 all the way down to just $26.
But here's the thing, the gamble didn't really pay off. U.S. shale producers turned out to be way more resilient than anyone expected. And meanwhile, those super low prices blew a gigantic hole in the Saudi budget. The irony is, the financial pain from this oil war is what finally forced the kingdom to confront its own dependency on oil, kicking off huge reforms like Vision 2030 and the partial sale of their crown jewel Aramco. And that brings us full circle, right back to the crisis today. The conflict, the fear, it's all focused on this one narrow strip of water, the Strait of Hormuz. More than a fifth of the entire world's daily oil supply has to pass through this tiny choke point. That makes it the most critical, and right now, the most dangerous artery in the entire global economy.
You know, when you look at this whole story, you see the great paradox for the Gulf nations. Oil has been both their crown and their curse. It allowed them to build these incredible modern empires from nothing. But it also made them a permanent battleground, constantly caught between a world trying to move on from fossil fuels and the endless regional conflicts that their own wealth keeps stoking. So, we're left with this huge, critical question. The very foundation of power in the Gulf is shifting under their feet. As the oil age slowly starts to wind down, will that immense wealth it created be the key to building a peaceful, stable future? Or will it just end up fueling the flames of the next great conflict? Honestly, the answer to that question is going to define not just the future of a region, but the stability of all of our world.